The robots of Amazon is more simple, go more slowly, and is less dense. Exotech changed the game by coming with small robots that we mass manufacture. We go twice as fast, save 1 second, and in the end you will save 200,000 euros. Only if you do hardware, you know that you will lose half of the investor. Amazon shown that logistics was a weapon where you have no customer and you are burning your money of friends and family. Our robot, they do 3,000 kilometers in their lifetime. First customer was Cdiscount, a French e-commerce player.
Today's guest is Romain Moulin. He's the co-founder of Exotech, which is one of the most exciting robotics companies in the world. Their robots have increased warehouse productivity over 5 times. And to do that, they've created this fleet of small robots that go into the warehouse, climb up the rack, find the right items, and then bring them back to human pickers. What started as just an idea in a PowerPoint presentation now employs over 1,200 people, is the 25th unicorn in France, and has raised over 500 million euros. In our conversation, Romain takes us back to the days before they had their first client, the hardest parts of building their hardware, and why logistics is such an underrated weapon in business today. It's a great episode. Let's get stuck in. But just before we do, let me introduce this week's sponsor of the OpenVC podcast, Intercom.com. Intercom help founders by making your customer service 24/7. Through their use of innovative AI, you can answer 50% of your customer needs instantly. Intercom is offering 1 year free if you use the code OpenVC, all in caps, at the checkout using the link in the description below. And let's get back to the episode. For those of us that don't know, could you explain what Exotech is and what you guys actually do?
Yes, of course. So Exotech is designing, manufacturing, installing, maintaining robotics solutions for the warehouse. So you will find our systems in fulfillment centers. They need to do order picking, which is to assemble several units together to send them to a final customer. And what could be seen as an easy task, in fact, is quite complex because it might be a warehouse of 70,000 square meter with 5 millions of units. So finding just 2 units in these 5 millions, putting them together and doing that all day long, in fact, creates really a difficulty. And if you try to do it the most basic way, in the manual way, and most, I would say, warehouse still do it that way, you will end up having an army of people in the warehouse and they will walk 15 kilometers trying to find the different units together and send to you. So that is the pain point. And how Exotech solves it? We solve it with an army of robots, small robots that are the size of a suitcase. And these robots move on the floor of the warehouse, but at some point they can grab the rack on which we store the different goods, and they will climb up to 14 meters, take the totes in which we have the goods, and bring the totes to your operator, your picker, which is outside of the stock. Your operator starts to work very fast because they do not have to walk, and the robots are feeding them with everything which is needed to constitute these orders. I'm simplifying because we do much more complex warehouse, but always in the middle of the warehouse, you will have this 3D robot, which is key in what we do, and which at the very beginning of Exotech, that was a starting idea. It was, let's make a 3D robot to stack up to the ceiling and to really feed the picker so that we multiply their speed by several X.
Fantastic. So I completely understand the pain point. Humans manually walking to locations, picking things up, they can make mistakes, they can be slow, they can't reach the highest of areas. We need robotics to speed up that process and make the job a lot more enjoyable. But something you said in that introduction made me quite surprised. You think a lot of warehouses today are still heavily manual? What would you assume is the current market landscape for robotic warehouses versus fully manual warehouses? I'm not in the sector, but I'd have thought there'd be a lot of robotics already in place.
Yeah, so in terms of how many warehouses there are, I think 90% of the warehouses are manual and 10% are automated or robotized, mainly because a lot of warehouses are too small or were too small to be automatized. And when you start, if you are a small e-commerce player, of course you do it with people and a bunch of shelves. But when you grow, you start to have this problem of people walking too much or too many people, and you cannot manage the traffic between people. So I think that, yeah, maybe 1/3 of the overall logistic as automation or robotics, and 2/3 is still manual. And one reason for that also was that before robotics came in our industry, the only solution you had to improve that and to improve the throughput, your speed of picker or your density, was really heavy machinery. You would build a complete machinery on the customer site that could take 2 years to be installed, that could deliver a very good performance, but it was tough to deliver it. And once you had delivered it, you would not touch it anymore because it was so hard to put in place that you don't modify it. And Exotech changed the game by coming with small robots that we mass manufacture in the factory. And I tend to say that we work in the factory, we don't work on the customer site. And what does it bring? It brings that we go twice as fast to deploy our system because most of it is already assembled and tested here. And also, I can tell the customer, don't worry about the future. If your throughput goes up or down, we'll come back and we can add or remove robots. So we give them the flexibility. And most of the time, people stay in manual just because, as they don't know what the future is, they cannot invest in a heavy machinery. So if you just bring them this robotic system and tell them, don't worry about the future, that will follow your growth, then we have created and we have access to a new piece of that market that was manual before, that would go for flexible robotics, but not for heavy automation. And that's a piece of the market that we opened.
That's a gem. And so that's really, really insightful. You had this vision that swarm technology would be more effective, more flexible, and ultimately better for the customers than doing a
Well,
huge.
maybe I could have a word on this one, because people tend to say that we had the vision with the co-founder and other things. And if you get back in time and see how much we understood of unit picking, logistics, and order fulfillment 10 days ago, the answer is not much. So
Okay.
there's a bit of luck. Also, a big part of it was the robots are cool, but still, I would say it's a balance. I would say, confirmed our idea and intuition by discussing with those people, and we understood that, yes, indeed, they needed that flexibility. But I'm always a bit annoyed when people say you had seen everything at first and you had the vision. No.
Okay. Well, that's very humble. Was that a feature in your pitch decks when you were actually trying to fundraise? Hey, a big differentiator for us is that the CapEx required is smaller and we're going to be a lot more flexible to our customers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if we have a startupper here, I guess probably half of them have somewhere on their slide, how do you say, a BCG matrix, like
Yeah,
Foursquare. And we have had our own matrix. It's still in the deck. One is performance and one is flexibility.
okay.
So you have the manual, which is flexible but not performant. You have the whole industry automation, which is performant but not flexible. And you have Exotech that is at the same time flexible and performant. And that's true. That's really what we were telling our customer is you get the performance, but you have the flexibility on top of that. And that's what we told to the investor also. I'm quite lazy also, so the slide that we show to investor are the same that we show to the customer and the same that we show to employee. Makes our life easier.
I like that. Yeah, you said you shared on a podcast previously that you don't like manipulating the truth depending on who you're speaking to, because employees
Yeah.
might need to see a different side of reality than your customers can see. So has that ever been challenging for you? Has that ever caused problems being so transparent? It seems like the right way to be as a founder, but I'm sure there must have been moments where you didn't want to share something and you had to because it was your philosophy.
I think keeping it as a philosophy and an important one has really eased our life in Exotech. And I would say each time that I saw someone diverted from this philosophy, it created problem. All in all, I think it's the best philosophy, and it eases a lot, and it creates trust from your customer, trust from your investor. And when the shit hit the fan, you are pretty happy to have a customer that trusts you, investor that trusts you
Okay.
during the difficult moment, because they know that you are telling exactly the truth. I would not have said that 3 years ago. But the full transparency, when you grow, really starts to create problem because it's too much information. So we are used to share everything with everybody, but at some point, the quantity of information to be shared starts just to be too much so that people understand. So we have really put in place filtering of the information, and it's not filtering because we don't want them to know, it's filtering because we want them to have a more concise understanding of the necessary information that they need to do their work.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that taps into the culture that you've built at Exotech. And there's this fascinating insight that I found, which is every 2 weeks, you personally speak to all of the new hires, telling them about the company, getting them on board with the culture. When you're at a company as large as you are, how many employees do you have now? Many hundreds.
We are 1,200 right
Okay.
now.
North of 1,200. What's the
Yeah.
key messaging that you try and portray to the new hire that preserves the culture?
Yeah. Well, there are several. So the values of Exotech have not changed. The first one is customer focus. We call it's understand your client, which means be focused on your client, but also in what we do. Exotech in our industry, you are using robotics to solve a very different problem, which is logistics. So it means you need to know what logistics is, and customer does not really care about your robot. They just want the job to be done. So that's one of the message I insist the most on is go on site, talk to the customer, understand what they do. A grocery customer is not the same as a fashion customer. They don't have the same constraint. And it kind of comes from the trauma. I was working at GE before, General Electric, which is a company I have a huge respect for, but the company was so big that I was designing machines, and I have seen these machines in action only a few times in my life. And it was a frustration, and but just because of the size of the company, you get further and further from your customer. So attaching everybody to the customer remains super important. And then the other values are really about working together as a team and not having we need to have different departments with a clear scope, but in the end, from the customer point of view, it must be one team delivering one product, which is super important. And the last one is being proud, because we want to build a big company, but we want that company to something that we are proud of, and we would never do something we would be ashamed of. So they are basic value, and I tend to say that if you have a good culture, it avoids a lot of processes and to write down everything, because you can just react to that culture and say, no, that is not right. That does not fit with what we want to be. So we spend a lot of time on it, formalizing it and sharing it with employee. And this also creates trust, once again, from investor, from customer. If they know that, and they will trust you much more.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So going back to the origins of Exotech, you shared there that the values haven't changed. But what initially sparked this opportunity in your mind? Because you were building medical device robots just before you
Yeah.
did Exotech. Historically, logistics and warehouses have not been a sexy place to be, and they've been even less sexy to investors because they historically required so much capital up front to get a working prototype up. You're dealing in hardware, not software. There's a lot of things stacked against you. So what sparked that fire that has enabled you to bash down all the barriers that stood in your way?
Yeah. So first, my personal sparkles and those of Renaud. Renaud, the co-founder and CTO of Exotech, he has the same background and same career. We started in an AGV company, so automated forklift. Moving pallets, it was a small company and quite an advanced company. And that was a very nice experience, because in that field, your ideas turns into a reality quite fast. And really, if you have a smart idea, your AGV tech turns and save 1 second, and in the end, you will save 200,000 euros to move pallets. It was very rewarding, and we loved that moment of our career. So we still had inside of us that love of our first job and of logistics. We knew that could be a cool industry for innovating, in fact, and really for having smart ideas. The second thing is, in 2014, Amazon announced that they would shut down the sales department of Kiva System. Kiva System was a company, a startup that they had bought a few years before, acquired for 700 million. So it made some noise on the market. that Amazon would pay such a price for a small robotics company. So it made noise. And when Amazon said, I keep that technology internally, I will stop selling it, that made even more noise. Like, you paid such a price just for you. So it means there is return on investment on such technologies. And that was a starting point of one day with Renault discussing about the news of robotic in general, as usual. We said, well, maybe we could do something in that field. And then we went like crazy engineer trying to find solution. And if you know the robots from Amazon, they are in 2 dimensions. So the basic starting idea was we need to do something in 3 dimensions because that's how you get much higher in density, because Amazon automation is limited to 2 meter, a stock of 2 meter.
Wait,
So it's not dense.
just to help me explain that one, they can only reach up to 2 meters high.
So they don't climb. You need to imagine that it's like standard manual shelving, but then the robot is in 2 dimensions, and the robot will go under the shelf, lift all of the shelf, like a 300 kilogram shelf, and bring you the shelf. So it's a massive robot, but simple, just going on 2D, lifting shelf, bringing shelf.
Okay.
So whereas our robots are smaller, they climb on the rack and they bring a 30 kilograms tote, so much smaller. So they run faster and go higher. So the robots of Amazon is more simple, go more slowly, and is less dense. So I tend to say we have a better system than Amazon. But they had the idea first of using a fleet of robots to do a job, and that had that flexibility aspect.
Okay, and they still have the system where the robots bring the pickers, that
They
shelf.
put that everywhere.
Ultimately, it's the pickers that are then taking units out.
They have deployed millions of these robots, so they have shown that it works well, and it can be industrialized at that scale. So that was a starting point. And Amazon also, to what you just said, Amazon had shown that logistics was not that old-fashioned department that you would be put if you have when you are old in a company and they don't want you anymore, they send you to logistics. Amazon shown that logistics was a weapon, and you could win your customer and you could win market share with logistics. So it's been, at least at that moment, 5 years that people started to recognize really that the key of Amazon was their logistics. And they had the smartest people in logistics, in supply chain, because that's visible from your end customer. That's how you build your chain and your value. Yeah. So the supply chain was recognized as a key department. And then the last one was hardware instead of software. And this one is still true. Yes. So investors, they love software. Why do they love software? Because in software, if you have 1 customer or 10 customer, 1,000 customer, it's almost the same price. So in terms of scaling, software is built to scale. Of course, you spend a lot of money with no customer at the beginning because it remains expensive to build the software. But then the famous hockey stick is more true in software. So when you go on the market to raise money, if you do hardware, you know that you will lose half of the investor, which is all right. Just the one which are purely interested in a certain business model and a certain P&L. Our P&L does not look like a software P&L. When we sell something, we must pay for it. So we are like Tesla, for instance. You cannot just give your car as a service, because at some point you need to pay for it. So in what we do, the margin is key. Your cost of goods sold is key, and that's really your efficiency of your manufacturing and your purchasing and your ability to deploy it fast, which is key in making money. In exchange for that, you burn less cash at the beginning because you get paid by your customer, and you get paid for what you do when you deploy a system on a customer site.
So tell us, who was the first customer? How did you go from having an idea, you've built robots in the past, but how did you actually land your first customer with enough trust to say, help me automate my logistics? I don't want to use an established player. I want Exotech's robots.
So when people ask me what was the most difficult or the most stressful moment in Exotech, that was this moment where you have no customer and you are burning your money of friends and family, and you see your account going down weeks after weeks, and you know exactly where you will die because it's a very clear straight line. So you need your first customer. And at that time, when you do hardware, you try to avoid to develop your hardware because this costs. So the best would be to sell a PowerPoint so that once you have sold it, you can develop your hardware and burn money because you are sure you have a customer. And that's really a key. If I meet hardware people, I'm like, try to sell it before you have spent money on your prototype, because a prototype is costly. So you need to be 100% sure that suits your user need. So we went with our PowerPoint to see customer. The first page of the PowerPoint was Romain Renault comes from GE, because that was the best asset we had to show, as we had no robots, and some 3D rendering. And the first customer was Cdiscount, a French e-commerce player, the second after Amazon, that really fell in love with the system because they were looking for a system. They had looked into this traditional automation system and they really were not happy with the flexibility. They needed something much more flexible. So we solved their pain point. It was performance and flexibility. And they signed for a small system. The chance that we had is they did not sign for a proof of concept or whatever. And it was not the innovation department wanting a proof of concept to show that they innovate. It was the supply chain people that wanted a small system that needed to deliver the performance, and that the best you can have as a startup is to have a real customer that needs you have clear requirements, clear commitment, date, they pay for it, and they won't be happy if you don't deliver, and that's the best. You know that you are fully focused. And I would say then Exotech switched to its second phase at that moment, which was not relaxing, I would say, but we knew that we would deliver something. It was pure engineering, which was more our initial field. We needed to deliver the customer. And of course, it helped a lot to convince the first investor.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So firstly, that's so much confidence because you've gone to the second biggest player in the market with just an idea. You don't have a working prototype and they love it. You walk out with not just a pilot, but a request for products. So this is happening when you've bootstrapped, you haven't raised money from Briga or 360 yet.
We had raised 300,000 from friends and family. And when we got that purchase order of 300,000 from Cdiscount, that is the moment where we raised 3 million from Briga and 360.
So were there any difficulties in building those first robots? Because you hadn't done it before. So you're on a tight deadline. You don't want to disappoint the customer. Even when you're delivering those first products, there's a balance to be struck between the tech innovation and the hardware innovation. And you need them both to be in alignment so that you deliver a product that works well for your customer. So in what was more challenging, the software or the hardware?
So, well, first of all, that balance is super important and is more important on hardware than software. Why? Because your installed base in software can be upgraded. Your installed base in hardware is very difficult to upgrade. And I will say we are not the worst because we can take a robot and replace it with a new robot. It's expensive, but it works because it's quite flexible. But in general, in hardware, upgrading your installed base is really a pain in the neck. Well, there's always trade-off between speed and quality, but you need to put more focus on quality because it's like a drug. If you do speed, you might solve your problem now, but you have created a problem for the next 5 years. And several startups in robotics have died of that. They went too fast, or they did not deploy hardware with enough quality, and then you get an install base, which is you create a debt that you cannot solve, that increases with time.
Wow. Going back, so you raised money from friends and family. You've gone and you've pitched this idea to the second largest e-commerce distributor in France. How long did it take you from having the initial idea to landing that contract?
So we started the company in summer 2015. We got that first contract and the first big fundraise in summer 2016, 1 year later. And we delivered that system that we promised into summer 2017, 1 year even later. Yeah.
So a whole year to get to deployment of the first customer.
Are we talking... get the robots designed, and it was mostly design, manufacturing, and then a few months for deployment on site. Yeah.
So is that sleepless nights back to back? Prototypes not arriving in time from China? What kind of things were going wrong in the early days there?
We were a manufacturer and we buy most of our components around us because of speed and quality. We reused also some suppliers that we had before, so we were not starting from scratch. But Yes, you have quality issue from supplier, you have design defect, you really assemble your robot and you see things which are not working, and you have reliability defect. And this is where you really need to have a very good tracking and people really working on that and good data analysis from the field, from your
Yeah.
install base. You need to gather everything to see what's going on because our robot, they do like 3,000 kilometers in their lifetime. So it's like a car. So fortunately, we can gather a lot of data from them to see what are the errors, what are the things which drives your plan for improvement. So you really need a lot of structuration and processes to ensure to reach the right reliability. In our industry, it's very tough, because when you deploy a system for your customer, or maybe not the first small one for Cdiscount, but the next one where already half of their throughput of their warehouse. So if that system just stops for 1 hour, it's a drama. If it stops for 1 day, it's really hurting extremely badly your customer. So it should just never stop, which requires a lot of work on it so that it's indestructible.
Wow. Okay. So uptime is absolutely critical. That comes
Yeah,
back to customer focus. They don't really care about the solution. They want the results. And
yeah,
that's the
exactly.
job, to deliver the results. Okay. Was there any particular component or piece of software that was really tough to make right and perfect, in your opinion? Was there something that niggled away for over a year that you guys eventually overcame?
Yeah, so there's two pieces of software at equal complexity. The one running in the robot and the one running the fleet of robots. The one running in the robot is a pure robotics performance software. It goes from A to B, take a tote and bring it to A back. And it needs to do that as fast as possible, as accurately as possible, with as less problem as possible. And the other one, the fleet manager, need to send the right mission to the right robot at the right moment for the right operator to take the right tote. So it's a huge combinatorial choice. You need to dig into a tree and to find the shortest, the
Right.
quickest solution to the logistics problem. I would say when we started the company, both had equal complexity and equal challenges. But then once your robot is going anywhere to anywhere, it's really about the fleet of robots. And that's where you get most of your value, of your performance. You can bring things that nobody can do. So this part of fleet management and logistics choices has really become the biggest part and the one with the most intelligence challenges. And
What about hardware? Was there any particular component that wasn't robust enough or would consistently break no matter what you tried to change?
the connections and the wiring.
Eh,
So this is because our robot drive on the ground and they drive on the concrete. And sometimes you have your slabs have small holes or stuff like that. So the vibration level is quite high on our robot. Probably the stuff that improved and was modified the most to improve the reliability was the wire, the connectors, the moving wires, attaching it well. When you start, you don't expect that this will be the stuff creating the most problems. So now in our latest generation, it's wired like a car, in fact, and that's where you get the biggest reliability.
Fantastic. Okay. So that's probably a bit annoying though, right? Because it takes a bit more time to manufacture that, maybe a bit more cost to actually make sure those wiring connections are secure. But it comes back to, if it's right by the client, it's right by us.
What we offer to the customers of Exotech is a fixed fee for maintenance, meaning whatever the spare part we change, that would be a fixed fee. So it's not on their side to care about the reliability of the robot. It's on our side to make money within that fixed fee of changing as less spare part as possible. So it was a good way to convince the first customer because they could not say you are not reliable. We said you won't see it. And for us, it was a very good way also to push everybody to improve the reliability because you see it in the numbers. And nobody can be happy to sell spare parts. It's just that stuff should not be replaced. And we are not in the spare part business. Yeah, that's how we solved it. And a lot of time we try to attach the customer to your objectives inside. If you want, I take another example, you want your reliability or your performance level of the system to increase or to be good, then you tell your customer, if we don't hit the performance, we will pay penalties. And then
Okay.
instantly, everybody on the maintenance is aligned of, we need to hit the performance, otherwise we get the penalties. And we are more than happy to propose the customer to pay penalties because it goes in the direction of Exotech. So we align the customer needs to our roadmap.
Okay, so that's really innovative and somewhat of a surprise, I think, because it involves taking on a lot more risk than perhaps most of the incumbents would have wanted to do. So, in
Yeah.
terms of reducing maintenance and increasing reliability, do you have to do like an annual check on each robot? Do they get an MOT? Is there
Yeah.
proactive maintenance and things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, we have preventive maintenance. So a manual, it tells you exactly all the tasks you have to do on the robot, and it depends on how many kilometers they have done. Depends on the axis. So we might say that every 10,000 kilometers you check this and that. Every 20 kilometers you check this and that. And we have created a software which we call the Exo Tracker, the one that knows exactly what is the status of the install base. And that software is tracking how many kilometers each axis of the robots are done, and it creates tickets for the maintenance people telling, okay, we have reached a level, we need to check this and that. So it's a lot automated, and our people on site, they are guided by the maintenance, which is driven by this level of periodic checks that needs to be done.
I love it. Okay. Back in 2022, I saw a quote that Exotech technologies would help warehouses improve the efficiency of an individual worker from picking about 80 items an hour to 400 items an hour. Now, that was back in 2022. So, what kind of figures are we able to get today?
So on the new generation of robot that we have revealed at the beginning of this year, you can go at 600 picks per hour.
Fantastic.
And so for that, we have improved the ergonomics. You don't pick in 1 to 4 like you did on the old system. You pick in 1 to 1. Sorry, 1 to 4 means you have 1 tote source and 4 totes target. And so you need to walk a bit between your totes. And now you have 1 tote source, 1 tote target next to each other. So you can go much faster. And we have improved the
Yeah.
robot cycles and so that you can reach such cycle. And we will never announce more than that because we have reached the limit of a good ergonomics on the workstation done by a human.
Okay.
Well, I
So,
should say we will never announce more than that with human picker.
okay, I see. I like the direction that we're going here. So the constraint wasn't actually the robots, it was the human side of things, and then being able to pick quickly enough into the right tote. So you simplified that down, making their job
Yeah,
easier.
exactly. It's also a matter of respect. We could have said before you can do 600 on the
Yeah.
system, but that would have destroyed our poor picker. So, and there are repetitive movements, so you need really to be aware about how your body behaves on the workstation, so that you respect cycles and you respect the how to say the skeleton, the
Yeah.
muscles, and all of that. So we have made some tests with sensors to ensure that it's the best ergonomics we can do.
There's repetitive strain, which over many years could impact a
Yeah.
human. But why is the picking so difficult to automate? That seems like it's the last stage for most companies. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the dynamics of why that's so much harder than picking standard
Yeah.
units?
In general, I would say the complexity of your robots in any robotics thing that you are doing relates to your environment and its standardization. So the 3D robot that we do, the Skypod, has quite of an easy life because it always takes a tote, which is 650 millimeter by 450 millimeter with the same footprint in the same rack. So it's very standard from a mechanical point of view. It just needs to know its position on the ground. But then the interfacing with a different mechanical element is standard. If you do unit picking, you get in front of you a tote that sometimes will contain bottles of water, sometimes will contains a box of eggs, and if you take the box will open. Sometimes box of shoes, randomly placed. So the variability of what you see in the totes and what you need to manipulate is really, really high. And then you start to be in more difficult robotics tasks, which is one reason why it's not as advanced. But now with AI, you can really do much more thing than before, especially in this unstructured environment. So AI has really pushed the boundaries of what can be done in this kind of noisy environment.
Wow. Okay. So two follow-up questions. If you had a robot picker, what do you think the hourly throughput could be? If it's currently 400, what sort of uplift could that be?
If you pick manually, on the Sky Picker, we have an automated picker, which is called the Sky Picker. It can pick at 600.
Okay, so equivalent
already.
to what humans are currently doing.
Yeah, it can pick on the old generation of robot. It could pick as fast as the human operator on the new generation of robot.
Wow. Okay. And what's the best form factor for these robots that are doing the picking? Is it hands? Is it vacuum suction? I've seen a few cool things in that space.
You can do a lot with vacuum suction. If you hear some other podcast of me or some articles, you will see that I'm not a big fan of humanoid robots in the warehouse. And in general, I'm not a big fan of trying to copy paste the human because we have better solutions in the industry. The suction cup is one, meaning with a suction cup, you can already take a lot, but sometimes you need to grasp.
We touched on some of the harder moments of fan company and getting to market, some of the harder moments of commercializing the robotics. What are some of your proudest moments? If you look back on the journey, are there a
Yeah.
few moments where your mind was a bit blown or you just took a second to reflect on an achievement?
I think one moment that I remember is when I went to Cdiscount for the first time. Well, I've been there several times, but the first time that the system was mounted and operational, and I just looked to these robots that were climbing, taking toes, and what we had in mind in the past 2 years, and that was just 3D, and that was just PowerPoints was reality now, and I cried just a bit because it was a reality, and it's like an aquarium. You can wash your fishes during during hours, and it's the same with the Skypod. It's a moving robot. That's really fun. So it's really relaxing. So I had this moment of relaxation, and we did it.
Yeah.
That was a great moment. And then I think the best moment I had was after with a team that most of it is, there's a technical adventure. I remain an engineer, so very proud of the robot. One big thing that I expect from my work is a human adventure. And you build relations at the beginning of a company with people you are in the same boat. You build very strong relation, and seeing the team grow and seeing a friendship being built in Exotech, that was something I was super proud. And if I just need to take a moment, I would say when we did an ExoFest, so each year we have an ExoFest in June, which just consists of having a fest. But
Were the robots
I think it
invited?
was no, it's just for humans. And a few years ago, we had our first ExoFest where from 4 o'clock to 3 a.m. in the morning on stage, it was only Exotech employee. So an Exotech band, another Exotech band, an Exotech DJ, an Exotech a cappella R&B singer. And it's nice because it's a very nice environment and you see people having confidence and singing in front of everybody. So that was a nice moment, yeah.
Have there been any Exotech marriages?
Yes. And we have Exo babies coming.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. In terms of the future of warehouses themselves, do you see the geography changing? With the amount of people living in cities, with next day or same day deliveries, are we going to see warehouses in the inner city, perhaps, with your technology of being able to climb quite high instead of needing a long lateral presence? And do you see the influence of maybe drone technology coming into play?
Yeah, I think there was a hype maybe 3 to 5 years ago of the micro fulfillment centers inside of the cities, and some company had pushed hard on that. And companies like Gorillas, for example, or this company doing grocery inside the city were offering extreme rapidity that in fact would have needed automation to do such a job, but they pushed too far. They were losing the business the business justification of it, and in fact they were not paid enough to do the job they were promising to the customer. So selling a $10 bill at $9, which is a good way to grow, but not to live. We have more of a balance now, meaning same-day delivery is pushed more and more, which require to be close to your customer. So it does not mean inside of the city, but it means closer from your city. So it means that bigger warehouse might be split in several smaller warehouse, because then instead of one big warehouse and doubling the transportation cost or transportation kilometers, you just split in two warehouses and you will divide your transportation. So that's interesting for us because our system can be much smaller than this big heavy system I was talking about. And it's half the price. If you ask us to split a big system into two systems with half the throughput, it might be around half the price. So there's no big cost of deploying smaller warehouse to the for our customer, but it will still be outside of the city because you need land, because you need space, because you have trucks. So you don't want a fleet of trucks. You would have problem with the city mayor. But closer, yes, smaller warehouse, closer. That's I think how logistics will evolve.
All right, great. Okay, so that's the future. But now looking back into the past a little bit, you've raised over 500 million euros for Exotech today. It's an impressive sum for anybody. But for the founders looking to raise the money today and seeing you raise such large quantities, what's your mentality when it comes to dividing that capital and prioritizing that capital? Is it abundant? Are you able to put half of it away and save it for a rainy day? Or does all of it need a place?
So 500 is a primary plus secondary. So in pure cash, we had a bit less than that. But we have had always the philosophy of keeping a strong treasury inside of Exotech. The reason for that is we deploy system that can range from 1 million to 100 million. So when you go to see a customer and you tell them, I'm deploying a 100 million system for you, you need to show that you have a very good balance sheet and that you are not going to die if there is a problem. Of course, we invested that money in R&D, in sales, in structuring the company and allowing. You always need to structure the company for what you will do in 2 years. So you are spending money ahead. So that's one reason for that money. But we had always a very good treasury and we raised money always long before we needed it so that there would not be any question. And we did not want to have a time lock of needing to raise money at some point and things like that.
If I was to put you on the spot and say which investor has added the most value to Exotech, is there someone in particular and something they did that you would like to say?
Each of them, they would be jealous if I tell that I prefer one of them. Something that went right with Exotech is we always selected investor that had a good cultural fit and had a good understanding of what we do because we are a different animal. All of them will understand what is a software as a service. Only a few of them will understand what is a hardware business, but all of them are different value. Goldman Sachs, for instance, came in the last round and Goldman Sachs has such connection. So each time I have a question, I can ask Goldman Sachs, they will know someone that might have an answer to that.
Okay, so they've all brought value in very different ways, but that's a good
Yeah.
diplomatic answer. How do you think about competition and, creating defensive moats? Are you actually in line to get disrupted when there's a new technology that comes out that can pick better? Because you've got a lot
Yeah.
of hardware built in.
Yeah. So on one end, we are sticky to our customer, meaning when your customer deploys your system, you are with them for 10 years at least, probably more 15. You know how they go. You discuss with them every month. So your install base is key. And in fact, the traditional automation that were here before we existed, these are still huge players. They have a huge install base. They have very good relations with their customers. So we still market share, but you can see in our industry the importance of your customer base and install base because they don't switch like that. That could be more easy in some software. So you don't have huge reaction. You could not wake up one morning and then you have nothing left. It does not happen like that. And these are systems which are so critical and so impactful on the supply chain of the customer that there's an inertia. But I would not bet on that just for to say we can sleep well. it remains in an innovative industry where you can have a smart idea and you can really change the game with your smart idea. So the robot we have shown at the beginning of this year, the new generation of Skypod, is really a game changer. But we need to do that to stay ahead of the competition, because even the traditional player, they are not stupid, so they develop their own robots. Everything that I said at the beginning of Exotech about its flexibility and performance, people are coming to it. So you need to develop the next feature, you need to develop the next machine so that you still are ahead of competition. So it's a fun game.
You can't rest for too long because everyone's trying to fight for that next customer.
Yeah.
Amazing. Look, thank you very much for your time, Romain.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Harrison. Thanks for your nice question. They were super interesting.